Yes, guys, what's going on? It's Spec here, and today we have a tier list for the best neutral gold cards in Gwent. If you're a new player, these are the best cards to craft if you have limited scraps and resources, because simply you can play them in every single faction. So, of course, the top is the absolute geezer. These are going to be the best ones, the cards I would recommend everybody crafting. And down at the bottom, we've got the Bushy tier. If you're wondering why the Bushy tier is at the bottom, Bushy and I've got a little bit of rivalry. He's trying to be Master Miller, but I am the King of Mill, and I hope you all know it. I also want to give a massive shout out to the Invincible 333 who set this tier list up for me. Big shout out to him. Much love. Alright, first card we've got Olgyard. This card is an absolute stinker of a card. Really terrible. The only reason it's not in Bushy tier is because I love this character. Do not craft this card. Do not play this card. It sucks, but because Olgyard's a geezer card, he can't be in the Bushy tier, right? All right, up next we've got Agora. Agora is going to go into the decent tier, all right? Now, this is controversial. She could go into popping off because she does see competitive play in costume monster decks. But as a neutral card, this is not a card you're going to want to play in every faction. It's only monsters. Every faction has better locks than this, except monsters. So, while this is a card that sees play at the highest competitive level, I'm going to put it right at the top of decent, just because it's not really one I would recommend crafting early days. There's going to be better cards to spend your scraps on. All right, up next we have Ale of Ancestors. I'm going to put this in the stinker tier. It's just not very good, to be honest. It's an artifact that's boosting by 3. It has Zeal and has a cooldown of 2. So you can get a lot of points out of this, but often you're going to have other engines that you're going to want to prioritize over this card. It's a very expensive card as well. It used to be quite good. It's just not really there anymore. It needs a buff. The reason I'm not going to put this in Bushy tier is there's got to be worse cards, mate. There just has to be. But I feel like this is the kind of card that if you were to get it, like, maybe it is Bushy tier. Honestly, this one could be Bushy tier. Chat reckons this might be Bushy tier. We're going to leave it at the bottom of Stinker for the moment, but it might get relegated. You know, it might just get relegated. All right, next you have Barong. Barong, I'm going to put in decent. The reason I'm putting this above Agora is you can use this card in so many decks. It's a 9-point card for 6 provisions that has Witcher synergy. Many factions have good Witcher decks, such as Skellige, such as Northern Realms, and this is a card that you could play in both of those decks for pretty good success. Okay, it doesn't see that much competitive play anymore, but it's still just a pretty decent card. One that I would definitely recommend playing. Yeah, it's just pretty good. If you're playing a Witcher deck, put this card in your deck. It works with Leo. Up next, what's this card called? Betsy, One-Eyed Betsy. Yeah, up next we have One-Eyed Betsy. Again, this card, pretty decent, honestly. Like, doesn't see much play anymore, but it's a pretty good card. It used to see a lot of play. I know in like mid-rangey decks, there's often better cards now, better neutral cards that we're going to get onto that are going to be in this absolute geezer tier, but still a pretty decent card. All right, up next we have Black Blood. Meh. I honestly kind of forgot this card existed. I think like you could probably build a pretty fun deck around this card. Maybe it's just in Stinker, honestly. Maybe Ale of Ancestors is in Bushy tier, I think. Yeah, this is in Stinker, this is in Bushy. I reckon there's some better mech cards. And next we have Scepter Displays. It's going to be in Stinker. Just a really bad card. It's what, 10 points? Honestly, you could probably put this in Bushy tier too. White Frost, I'm going to put in Stinker tier. You can build some fun decks around this card, so could be worse. Regis Bloodlust, I'm putting in Meh. It's just very power crept. If you compare this card to Northern Wind, which is a bronze card, it's just worse. The only reason, again, I'm not putting this in Stinker tier is because if this is the kind of card you get in a keg, it's going to do an alright job for you at first, but one that you're going to want to remove from your deck. Whereas these Stinker cards, like, you're never really going to pick them from a keg if you're offered them, I don't think. Alright, Han Marvin's Blue Dream, up next. I'm going to put this in Stinker tier. I feel like this card, Renew got nerfed alongside this, where it can only hit 9 provision cards. I feel like Han Marvin's kind of should just be able to hit any gold card in your opponent's graveyard still. It was a really good card back then, and that's why it got nerfed. But ever since then, it's just been completely irrelevant, and I would never play this card again. Though, if you get it in a keg early days, there's worse cards, right? There's worse cards. All right, Olgyard, I'm going to put in Popping Off. Olgyard's a great card. If you can play this card in round 1, 6 carryover, really good. Also, you can use it in Hyperthin. You can use it in Scoia'tael with Precision Strike to buff your Sentinels. Tactical Decision in Nilfgaard. The Hyperthin means you get extra carryover on all your Hyperthin payoff cards, so you buff your Golem, and then your Vilgefortz, your Exartheus, your Yennefer all get those extra 2 points. So that's really cool. And yeah, best used in decks which you can play this card in round 3, and boost cards in your deck and still play those. So Tactical Decision being a good example because you can use your leader to draw those cards. Also, the other one being P-Strike because you can buff your Sentinel. So really, really good card. Up next, Alza. Really tempted to put Alza in the absolute geezer tier, but he's not quite a universal card you can just slot into every deck. You have to build around this card. What a great card, though. Pacts, teleportations mean you've got lots of good 4-provision spell cards, and Neuromancy. What a great card with Alza. If you play Neuromancy with Alza, you've got a chance of getting Rience, She Who Knows, Keltullus. Just some incredible cards you can get with Alza. I absolutely adore this card. I would highly recommend you guys build some fun decks around this card. And next we have Triss Butterfly. This is like a mech card, I think. Pretty bad. Even in my Glace decks, like I never play this card. But it's not quite as bad as these. Like it's a little bit better, right? Like I feel like Regis and Triss are kind of stinker cards. But like they're a level above these other ones. So I'm going to put Triss in meh. I next have Caretaker. I'm going to put him in average. Again, it's a card that sees some competitive play because of the relic tag. Maybe we could put it up into decent just because of the relic tag, right? It synergizes with the relic cards, which there's more being printed of quite recently in the latest expansion. So we'll put him in decent just for that reason in monster decks again. Wouldn't really play him outside of monster decks. Armory, I'm honestly decent, bottom of decent. It's a location that has 6 carryover in the armor section. So this works quite well in Keltullus decks if you want to protect something like a Siri Dash. I know Red Drain brought it to, I think, an open. Also has some cool synergy with armor decks that use Draco Turtle, Iris Shade. So yeah, indecent it goes. All right, Ard up next. It's a very meh card. Honestly, the fact it's not in Stinker kind of blows my mind. It is the worst Garrot card by distance. It's been wanting a buff for a while, but it's not quite happened. So yeah, Ard in meh. Please give Ard a buff. That would be cool. All right, Cleaver up next, or Carlo. He's going to be a meh. Again, this card was super... I'm going to put him in average. This card used to be really good. Honestly, it's got Dwarf Synergy. It's not that bad. This card used to be in every single deck. So, yeah, we're going to put him in average. We'll start filling this up. We've got Kyro next, which does work with the Unicorn. We'll do these two together. Where's the Unicorn? Yeah, Kyro next and Unicorn. I put him in average. Again, alongside Cleaver, these cards used to be staples in every deck. They're pretty bad. But if you're playing a Koshi Relic deck, they are relics, so they do have that sort of synergy. There's worse cards. Again, it's the kinds of cards, none of these cards you're ever going to see in competitive decks, realistically, at the top level. But if you're a newer player, these are the kinds of cards that can definitely fill a gap, especially when you're moving from faction to faction. All right, Siri Nova up next. I'm going to go for Popping Off for Siri Nova. It's a card you have to build around. You cannot use any cards over 9 provision, so 9 provision is going to be your cap. But she has resilience. She's really bloody good. She has a shield. She has Veil. The only reason she's not in an absolute geezer tier is because, again, you have serious deck building restrictions that mean that she's just not that good, realistically, and she's very difficult to build around. But she's just a great card. Right, up next we have 2 more series. First of all, we have Siri, Vanilla Siri. I'm going to put her in Popping Off. She's definitely above the decent cards. She doesn't see much competitive play. She's very, very difficult to use, and I wouldn't recommend her to newer players. But any card that can give you card advantage is just inherently incredibly powerful. I feel, though, as if Dash wasn't quite as good, a lot more people would be giving Vanilla Siri the respect that she does deserve. Alright, next we have Colossal Ifrit. This card is a 4 power, 10 provisions that damages all units on an opposite row by 1 and has cooldown 3. I'm going to put in average. Again, it's a card I would never put in my deck out of choice, but it's kind of okay. Alright, RS Companions, I'm putting in Popping Off. I flipping love this card, mate. I love this card. Again, not one I would recommend for a majority of decks, but I do play it in a lot of my decks. I love this card, mate. A Glace decks. It has really cool synergy with the Iris cards, where you can basically put any card of your choice in hand, and then you choose what to discard. So this card, just on its own, is just a high roll card. You tutor any card and it discards a card at random. So let's say I wanted to put my Alza in hand, it's then going to discard a random card which can include my Alza, which is rather sad. But if you have Iris and Iris Shade, it's got some really cool things. It's also got discard synergy for Skellige decks. So I'm putting it in Popping Off, but mainly for Skellige decks. And if you want to play a Mima Glace deck. Artifact Compression, definitely, without doubt, Popping Off. Really underrated card. It's one of the only gold cards that's in neutral at 5 provisions. I love this card. It's a spell, so you've got the Alza synergy. Really, really good card if you're starting off. I would definitely recommend crafting this card early game for just a cheap gold card that you can put in all of your decks. It's a pretty good card. Up next, Count Caldwell. I'm going to put Caldwell in average. I know Bushy likes this card, so he could really put him in the Bushy tier. But honestly, I'm going to give Count Caldwell some respect. I like this card. You can do some fun things with him. It's a 10 for 7. It's kind of power crept. But even if you just wanted to play it in monsters and can consume it so it doesn't go to your opponent's side, it's pretty good. Curse of Corruption, we're going and popping off. It's not quite in the absolute geezer tier, but it's just a bloody good card. Dandelion Vainglory is down here in the Bushy tier. Poet is up in the absolute geezer tier. Even though it doesn't see that much play, this card's ability is just inherently one of the most powerful abilities in the game, because you draw a card and then play a card. So if you're starting off in Gwent and you have like spare provisions in every deck, this is the perfect card because you're just basically adding 4 points onto your best card. If you have Poet in your hand, Poet is always going to be the best card in your hand. Okay? Even though, again, it doesn't see much competitive play, it is just an incredible card early game because it was always it's the best card in the game in theory, right? If provisions weren't a thing, which they didn't used to be in beta, this card was auto included in every single deck. I'm putting Absolute Geezer. It's going to be right at the bottom of Absolute Geezer, but the card is just inherently one of the best in the game. It just is quite expensive, which is why it doesn't see competitive play. Okay, my chat's bullying me. We're going to put it on popping off. Becca's Twisted Dark Mirror, whatever it's called these days. I'm putting it in lower popping off. Works kind of similar to Artifact Compression, and it's going to reset, but it's then going to damage by the amount you've reset as well. So if your opponent plays, for example, I don't know, Osral, rather than just saying it to 1, you're going to kill it, right? If they boost something with a Swallow Potion, rather than just resetting it by 6, you're going to reset and then deal 6 damage. You can also use it on your own cards as well if they're damaged and boost them up. So yeah, pretty cool. Decoy, we're going to be decent. Like, I really like Decoy, but it's kind of fiddly, awkward to use. Double Cross, I'm also going to put in decent. Just been overshadowed by Neuromancy. We're going to put this Dragon Micturek right at the top of popping off, probably. Maybe a little bit lower in popping off. There's honestly some really good neutral cards. It kind of boggles my mind. This card's just very good. Very, 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 very good card. Just the maths kind of checks out on it. If you're playing like a control deck, it's just a pretty decent card. It's just pretty decent. I like it. Dragon's Dream, stinker tier. I never play this card. It is a bomb, which probably saves it a little bit, but I never touch it. Doo-Doo, I'm putting in average. You can do some fun things with Doo-Doo. The Roomlight Brothers, I'm going to put them in decent. They're kind of fun. I don't know where the other one is. Maybe they're average. They're average, right? They've got to be average. Yeah, we're going to put these in. I'm going to start being a little bit more strict. Like, I think I'm going to knock a few down as I go. All right, up next we have Ethereal Average. It's actually not that bad. It's kind of good in fruits, right? Ike, decent, underrated card. If you want to play some dragons, like, and there's quite a lot of neutral dragons, by the way. Villain Tretamurth, who we'll get onto. In fact, we'll put Villain Tretamurth up here into the decent category as well. But what you might notice is in the decent category and in the popping off, 2 dragons, right? You've got 2 dragons, you've got Ike. So Ike becomes just like a better Geralt of Rivia in those kinds of decks. So I really like Ike. If you can fit some dragons in, I definitely recommend Ike. Fisher King, average. I've actually got Fisher King next to me, one of my favourite card arts, but the card's just not that good anymore. Used to be a lot better than it now is. All right, Francis Bedlam up next. Meh. Just not doing too much. What does this card even do? What is this card even called, guys? Free Company. Yeah, Bandits just aren't doing much. It's going in the bushy category, unfortunately. We'll put in Stinker, I guess. If you want to build a bandit deck, I wouldn't recommend it. Up next, we have the Ifret. It's like a movement card. Yeah, it's alright. It's not that bad. Like, movement's kind of valuable, but I'd probably just prefer straight as a Sparler, but it has seen competitive play. Gascon, he's an average. He's a meme card, but he's honestly not that bad. If you hire all the cards good. Oh, this is a Dow. Got ya. Jermaine's got to be in upper decent. You can use... Oh, honestly, I think Jermaine probably deserved popping off. He got buffed recently. You can do some really fun things with him with Slave Infantry. Also, he's like a good Swarm payoff card. Yeah, this card's honestly pretty good. Maybe not as good as the others, but I still think it probably deserves its spot here. Next, we have Gimpy. He's indecent. Kind of not that great. Glorious Hunt's indecent. Gaunter O'Dim is in meh, unfortunately. Honestly, he might even be in Stinker. We'll put him in meh just because it's Gaunter. I can't remember what this guy's called. Gregor, I think. He's in average. Hailstorm's in meh. Heatwave's absolute geezer tier. Like, you should craft this card. It should be one of your first crafts. Regis High Vampire is in decent. Commander's Horn is in average. Darren, I'm going to put in absolute geezer tier, I think. This card's just really cool. You can use it in so many decks. I love... Okay, maybe we'll put it here. And here. We'll put these cards at the top, right? I think that the geezer tier has to be reserved for things like Heatwave. Alright, Bantonio's roasting me, so we're going to knock this down to average. I think Gimpy Goen also needs to come into average. I was being a little bit overzealous there. Both of those are getting relegated, fam. Up next we have Igni. Igni's popping off. Great card. Love this card. Yeah, Olgyard, again, stinker. The only reason it's not low... Honestly, this one's better, though. This one's meh. This one's definitely the better Olgyard. Up next we have the other Ifret. This is like a much worse Regis, who got into meh, so this is a stinker card. Honestly, this is bushy tier, because it's just so much worse than Regis. Like, it just doesn't banish the card, right? There's, like, no reason to ever play this card. Iris, she's an average. The only reason she's not lower is because of the synergy she has with companions. I do sometimes play this card. Gascon's pretty decent, I would say. Gascon deserves to be lower. Decent. We have Ivo. Honestly, decent. If you're building like a all-in Witcher deck, there's worse cards. He's not great. Johnny. Decent. Again, maybe average. I'm going to put him in decent. I actually have a feeling Johnny could be kind of good with the new Squirtle cards that have just been printed. So, yeah. Knickers. I think Knickers deserves absolute geezer status. Honestly, Knickers is just a very good card. So if you're not sure how Knickers works, it's kind of weird. Very, very similar to Roach. So we'll look for Roach. Knickers is just like a better version of Roach. He is a provision cheaper. Roach is summoned whenever you play a gold card. Knickers is aiding you in the battlefield. Essentially, the way it works is the less cards you have in your hand, the more chance Knickers will summon. So if you have 0 cards in your hand, he will be summoned 100% of the time. If you have 1 card, there's a 90% chance that he's going to come from your deck and join you on the battlefield. If you have 2 cards, 80%, etc. So if you have 10 cards in your hand, there's a 0% chance that he can be summoned to the field. He's just a very good card. In Gwent, you can only play 16 cards. Basically, you have 16 turns. In total, you have 25 cards in your deck. So including cards which are thinning from your deck, which you don't actually have to physically play, makes a lot of sense. And Knickers finds himself into a lot of competitive decks. Chat thinks Roach is also in the geezer tier. Honestly, for a newer player, it's a really good card, but it's just overshadowed by Knickers. I'm going to put it right at the top of popping off. Definitely recommend crafting these 2 cards, though, for sure. Lady of the Lake, I'm putting her in decent. She's actually very good in Northern Realm Shields deck, but not really that many other places. Avalak Sage is popping off. Lots of great artifacts at the moment. Portal, the locations, scenarios. A really good card for those. Also, if you're playing an elf deck, he's kind of a funny way of playing an extra elf because he's an elf. So, yeah. Yeah, we're going to put the Witcher trio in decent, just because I would only really recommend using these cards if you're going all in on a Witcher deck. If you're using Vesemir and Leo, who we'll talk about in a little bit, that's the only real time I would recommend including these cards in your deck. But if you are including Vesemir and Leo, these cards are brilliant. So they're popping off if you're including those cards, but if you're not, they're at the top of decent, probably. I mean, honestly, they're average if you're not playing those other cards. Land of 1,000 Fables. This card is really interesting. It's honestly probably the card I sleep on personally the most because it got changed quite recently. You can do some really cool things with it. I'm actually going to put this card in popping off, which is super controversial because I never use this card. I wouldn't recommend it to new players, but I just think that as time goes on, there's going to be more things you can do with this card. You can get double Draug with Assault. You can transform your Assault into Draug. I'm sure there's going to be more things that you can do with this card as time goes on. Last Wish, it's average. You never really play this card, but like as a new player, there's worse cards. I'm not going to put it in meh because it thins your deck twice. It's a spell card as well. And it's also just like a very cool card art. Leo, popping off. This card is so good in Witcher decks. So good. Again, you have to play a lot of Witchers for this card to be worth it, but if you do, the card is great. And next we have Living Armors. Card's decent. It's not too special. Probably just a little bit below Gascon, I would say. Yeah, card's alright. Card's okay. Maddock, I'm putting in the absolute geezer tier. I flipping love Maddock. You play some cheap bombs, and then you've got yourself a great deck. Very similar to Knickers in the sense that it's being summoned from your deck. So you're investing in a card that isn't something you have to play and is giving you points. The difference between Maddock and Knickers is Maddock is 2 provisions more, but you can play it in multiple rounds. You can play it in round 1, round 2, and round 3. And also, it can play for more than the 3 points because of the Cataclysm. What a flipping card, mate. I love it. All right, Malaspina. Decent. Bit of a meme card, but it's fun. Mandrake. It's going right at the bottom of decent. Again, it's a meme card, but it opens up some meme card decks. Don't craft this. All right, it sucks. It's terrible. But I can't put it like around these other cards because I actually play this card in meme decks sometimes. Like cards like Viper, cards like Mill Northern Realms. Decks that suck, but are fun. And this card gives you that little bit of fun. So, yeah, I'm putting it down there. Damage 3 enemy units by 3. It's organic 9 provisions. I mean, the fact that it's got the organic tag, like, it's pretty meh, but honestly, there's some... It's got to be better than these other cards, no? Maybe I'll just put it in meh. It's pretty terrible. I'd never play it. Morale's probably popping off. Lower popping off. Very, very good card. Marching Orders, decent. Used to be a lot better than it currently is, mainly because of a Neuromancy, which we're going to get onto in a little minute. These sorts of cards just don't really see much play anymore. The Spoon Lady's average. She's all right. Master Mirror is pretty decent. He's a fun meme card. I'm going to put him above quite a few things in decent. He's honestly not that bad. Probably underrated. Oh, next we have Matter. Matter's popping off. Not as good as, again, a Neuromancy. Is a big reason for these cards like Matter, Marching Orders, Alza's Double Cross, which used to just be very, very, very good. That's the reason they're in the decent tier. I'm going to put Matter, though, slightly above these cards because she has use in mill decks. Also, if you've got a deck where you want to extend the round, like Movement Scoretel, she can extend the round, give all your engines that extra tick. Decks like Koshi as well can benefit from Matter because, again, you get that extra tick of adrenaline. So that's why she's above these other ones. Maxi is absolute geezer tier. She's actually going to go above Heatwave. Because she's so bloody cheap to craft. This card should be in every single one of your decks when you start off the game. I'm going to do a separate video on why Maxi is so damn good. But just to give you a quick overview, she's proactive, 6 points for 5 provisions, which isn't that bad. But the consistency this card gives you is second to none. You look at your deck in the order it is. So you know exactly what you're going to draw. You can take a picture, you can take a screenshot. It's not bad manners. People do it. It's allowed in competitive play. So you can do it. It's just such a good card. You look at the exact order your deck is in. Let's say Maxi shows you as well your deck. Oh my goodness, all my golds are right at the bottom of my deck. I'm never going to draw them. Guess what? Maxi allows you to shuffle your deck and you get to place your worst card at the bottom of it. So she's thinning your deck essentially by 1 because you're never going to draw into that card. So she's thinning, which is very powerful in Gwent. But you shuffle your deck and hopefully all those golds that are at the bottom go to the top. And also, if your best cards are at the top of your deck, happy days. You know that. You know exactly what to mulligan because you've got a screenshot. Okay, this next one, music decisions, it's decent. If you get the Resilient, this card would be up here. If you get Resilience every single time, but it's a high roll. It's what, like a 1 in 4, 1 in 5. So yeah. Selected Mutations, I'm going to put in decent as well. It's good in Northern Realms in particular. Honestly, it's kind of popping off in Northern Realms if you're playing a Northern Realms Witcher deck. We're using things like the Adepts in particular because you can transform the students into 4 power cards. Muzzle, it's decent. It's a good card. It's just kind of overcosted. It's also a spell for Alza, which does sort of help keep it. It's not a card that sees any competitive play anymore, but if you're a new player and you get this in a keg, it's a pretty decent card, I would say. Necromancy is popping off. Really love this card. Lots of uses. Just replaying a bronze card doesn't seem that good, but there's quite a lot of good bronze cards, especially in monsters, for example, where there's things that are strengthening. You could play another lava. Also, the Gankians are strengthening. Yeah, the card's just really good. You can play it in Mill as well. Really good card. And Neuromancy, absolute geezer tier. It's been a little bit overshadowed recently because of Sunset Wanderers, which we'll get onto. But yeah, what a card. Just completely overshadows all the other consistency cards, such as Matter, Last Wish, Alza's Double Cross, Marching Orders. This card is just so bloody good. Highly, highly recommend crafting this card. What you do need to be careful about, though, guys, is you see all these cards in the absolute geezer tier. You don't necessarily want to build a deck that's got all of these cards where you have a Neromancy, Maxi, Knickers, and Maddock. Often, if you're playing a Neromancy, you don't want that many other consistency cards, right? You just want to have a Neromancy, and that's kind of it. There's some exceptions for sure, but you just want to make sure that you're still including points within your deck. Consistency is good, and you still need points. Our next, Nivellen. Nivellen's in decent tier. Kind of a good card in certain decks. He's not very good particularly, but he's alright. Not that bad. Axii is in popping off. Really good card, especially with Sunset Wanderers at the moment. Just a much better version of, like if you compare it to Igni. Igni in previous metas has been a lot better, but Axii at the moment with the amount of people that are using Sunset Wanderers is just a bit better. That obviously might go out of fashion, so I'm going to put Axii actually below Igni, but currently in the current meta, Axie's bad. Obviously, you can answer defenders as well. The Nilfgaard defender just gets completely clapped by Axii, which is really cool, and it's got that little bit of armor. Vanilla Geralt. I'm going to put Vanilla Geralt in the top of decent. I think. Nah, I'm putting low popping off. Obviously, starter card. Really good card, honestly. Like, this card does see competitive play in some metas. Again, at the moment, being overshadowed by Axii. It can brick, which Axii can't. Like, you can use Axii on your own side of the board, and it's almost always going to play for points. Yeah, very good card. Now, next we have Avalak. Honestly, guys, probably one of the first cards I would recommend crafting after like a Nero maybe, and Maxi. Really good. Heatwave as well, maybe. I would probably recommend first. I put Maxi first because she's so cheap to craft, right? Like, there's no excuse not to craft Maxi. Avalak got buffed recently. Very good card. 12 points for 10 provisions. You can put them in every one of your decks. Really good. Just solid card to put in every single deck. That's why he's in popping off. I would argue that inherently Dash is a better card, but like this card is just so mid-rangey, you can just put it in every deck and have some success, so why not, right? Operator is going in the decent tier, opens the door in some specific decks, but, you know, kind of similar to Decoy, just not doing all that much. I think these cards probably deserve to be towards the lower side of decent here. Whereas cards such as like this deserve to be a little bit higher, right? Just very inconsistent, but like you can build some cool decks around them. Eskel, decent. He's alright. Tailbot played him in a tournament. Again, if he's a card you get early game, he's kind of alright. He's kind of decent, but not really doing much more. I think Phoenix probably deserves to be in the same category. If you play it in Discard Skellige, it's actually not that bad. I put Angoulême in popping off. If you build a deck around Angoulême, she's in the absolute geezer tier. The best decks for Angoulême are Nilfgaard decks where you use cards like Coup and Informant because you can make copies of your opponent's cards and trigger your opponent's scenario. Let's say your opponent plays Masquerade Ball and you don't have any aristocrats, but you have informants. You play Angoulême, you get to play a Masquerade Ball for 3 points extra and 5 provisions less. You then use informants and coup to trigger the Masquerade Ball, which is obviously going to help you assimilate cards as well. This card's really good with assimilates. Yeah, really good. Portal, absolute geezer tier. What a card, mate. Portal Fish Flappers in particular in Skellige. If you're not sure what Fish Flappers are, they're the Bear Witch Adept. It's just amazing. Works really well with Avalak as well, and as well as Maxi, because, with Maddock. You can play just 2 units at 4 provisions and lots of special cards like Megascopes, Bombs being a key example. And you get to thin your deck from 2 cards. Thinning is very good because, again, you only get to play 16 cards. So being able to play cards from your deck within Gwent is just a good thing often. It's also going to improve your draws because you're removing 2 4-provision cards from your deck, which increases the odds of you drawing your gold. So what a great card. Love this card. Very good in every single faction in the game now. It's in every faction this card is good. So yeah, great card. Up next we have Dao. It's decent. It's kind of, it's average, right? It's not doing much. Prize winning Cal is right at the top. No, I'm joking. I'm doning. It's in the meta, unfortunately. Sorry, prize winning Cal. Geralt Professional is indecent. It's pretty good with the Precision Strike leader ability, but apart from that, I wouldn't really recommend it. Onslaught, it's also quite good with. Unfortunately, Onslaught is just not a very good leader. Geralt Quinn. Geralt Quinn is a really interesting one. I could see a strong argument for putting this in the absolute geezer tier. I'm not going to quite put it up here, though. I'm going to put it in popping off, particularly in Skellige. This card is fantastic, but it's also great in any Witcher deck. again, the main reason I'm not putting it in the absolute geezer tier is all these cards you can just put in almost any deck, whereas cards like Alza and Quinn and Angoulême you really have to build around quite a bit. So yeah, it deserves to be in popping off. Great card though. Ridea, kind of similar. You have to build your whole deck around her. Statistically, just if you look at her as a card, she is incredible, but she comes at an incredible cost, which is that you can only play one copy of every card. You can't play 2 bronze cards. So yeah, she's in there. Okay, Ragnaroo. Ragnaroo's actually pretty good. It's in popping off, just good value on this card. Synergizes well with great swords. Again, it's unitless. It's a spell card for Alza. Card's just pretty good, honestly. Pretty underrated card. Freddy was very close to bringing this to Masters with his Flurry deck, but it's just been overshadowed by Avalak. Avalak got buffed, which means Avalak is basically this card, but just a little bit better because you have a body. More tempo, more points overall. I think this is 10 points, whereas this is 12. Yeah, Ragnaroo's 12. Yeah, it's the same. So this is the same amount of points as Avalak. Avalak just plays for 6 more tempo, which means it's a lot easier to get his value. It takes less time as well. And often tempo is very important in Gwent because that extra 6 points of tempo, or I guess 5 points of tempo, is pretty relevant at times at getting ahead and all those sorts of things. So yeah, that's a very good card, just overshadowed by Avalak. Regis is in the average tier. You can build a whole deck around this card and it's going to be incredible some games, but realistically it's pretty pants. Wouldn't recommend playing this card, but it obviously is one of the best cards in the game if you can set it up. Renew is definitely in popping off. There's some really good decks for Renew. Things like Mill being a key example. Of course, it can only play 9 provision cards or less. You cannot renew, for example, an Avalak, cannot renew a Dash, but you can renew an Idaran, as an example, a Mata, a Vilgefort, Tibor. So there's some cool things. Okvist is in the meta. Yeah, Okvist needs a buff, for sure. Becca's Rockside is in decent tier. Maybe it's in popping off, honestly. It's pretty good. One of the better spells. Yeah, pretty good. Royal Decree, I'm putting in decent. Honestly, I can't believe it. This card is really good, guys. I should probably put it in popping off. But it's just worse than Absolute Geek. It's just worse than the Aneromancy. If you have it, though, it probably deserves to be here. It's just very difficult to justify ever playing this card when Aneromancy exists. Because it's just worse. It's a tactic. That's one benefit. If you're playing tactics, this card is better. Apart from that, there's very little reason to ever play this card when Aneromancy exists. But it is a really good card. It's a starter card, so I wouldn't recommend like kicking this from your deck or anything. It's just that this card is just so much better than it. Right? Just overshadows it. Sir Quan is right at the top of decent. Very underrated card. It's like a 12 for 8. Honestly, I'm putting it popping off solid. If it dies, obviously it sucks. But what you can do with this card is if your opponent passes, very similar to Villain Trettenworth, which I didn't really touch on that too much. I'm going to put Villain here too, right at the bottom. If your opponent passes, these cards go at the top of decent. If your opponent passes, you can play these cards and their ability goes off. So this gives you 12 points of reach. Really underrated card. What does Sangreal do? Yeah, boost by 6 and give it shield. It's in average. I actually played this card once. Sarah's in meh. Johnny's just so much better than her. Scepter of Storms is decent with Vader Makar. There's some cool things you can do. The card on its own sucks, but Vader is the card that sort of makes it. So I'm going to put Vader actually right at the top of decent. It would be in popping off, but you rely on playing this kind of terrible card. But we'll put this at the top of decent, this at the bottom of decent, right? Kind of works. Scorch is popping off. There's some trap decks that make great use of this card. It's a really fun card. It's a classic Gwent card. How could it not be? It's not really seen in that many competitive decks, but I love Scorch, and it just makes some bad decks good. Like if you play a trap deck, you often have to play Scorch because you need points, and this is what you need. So yeah, Irish Shade is popping off. Very underrated card with Turtle in particular. I love this card. There's videos on my channel if you want to see it. Shoop is in decent. Like he's just worse than Ridea. He's power crept. He probably needs a buff, honestly. Not too much more to say about that. I often, if I build a Ridea deck, don't put Shoop in it. Sorry, Shoop. Siegfried is average, but no, I'm putting him in decent. Okay, Shoop deserves to be at the top of decent. Siegfried's in decent because he enables some meme decks. Sahil, pushy tier, terrible card. Skellige Storm, stinker tier. Snowdrop, popping off, mate. Especially in tactical decision, just kind of ridiculous. Elf Onion Soup is average. Stregobor is average. You can do some cool things with it. Summoning Circle is stinker. Honestly, it's bushy. It's terrible. I don't ever play this card. Alright, Sunset Wanderers. Best card in the game. Second to none. At the time of recording this video, it's 11 provisions. Most likely it's going to get nerfed. I would craft this card straight away, even if it gets nerfed to like 14 provisions, I think. If there's anything less than 14, put this card in every one of your decks if you're a new player. Craft it. Put it in every single one of your decks. It's overpowered. It's good. I mentioned before how good I think Poet is. This card is just Poet, but so much better. If you're a new player, craft this card. Trust me, you won't regret it. Surrender. Surrender's decent. Lambert. Lambert deserves popping off. Like in the right meta, where lots of people are playing Swarm decks, Lambert comes out to play, right? Is it a part of Star Collection? I don't think so. It was just part of the... It was part of the WitchCon event, right? Which I think is over. Yep, Lambert is in popping off. Like, Lambert just comes out to play when the meta's right. Alright, next we have Siana. Siana's going to be indecent. She's so inconsistent. Garrison, probably average. Ale, average. Triss is popping off. Really good card. I'd recommend crafting this card. Or if you get her in a keg, yeah, I'll take her, why not? This thing, Tempest, is a stinker. Terrible card. This thing is a meh. This is below of average. Triangle within a triangle is probably decent because it's a spell. Triss and Yennefer are popping off, but only in very specific decks, right? These two. In Reveal Nilfgaard, they're really good. Hyper thin Nilfgaard. If you want to see that as a video on my channel, that's why they're in this one. Agora, very meh. Uma, very meh. Unicorn, popping off. Vesemir, popping off. Willem is decent. Vivian is... what does this card do? Boost self by the provisions of the unit to the right. That's actually not that bad. She's a meh. I think... yeah, she's meh. Olgyard is average. You can do some cool things. This is... oh god, this is Vladimir. Wouldn't recommend it though, but you can build decks around it. Dora Grey is... honestly... popping off. Absolute geezer, in fact. I'm going with Dora Grey and Absolute Geezer. Yeah. Yeah. It's a neutral lock. It's cheap. You know, in every deck, it's going to do a job. It's going to save you a lot of crafting. Other factions, some factions have better options than Dora Grey. Like Jengi Ifret being maybe an example, but Monsters doesn't even have one. Jengi Ifret's kind of inconsistent. He's just a good card. Yeah. Cool. Sipper and Wiley is average. Wolfsbane is average. Scarlet is average. Yenkon is average. Zoltan is stinker. And then these last two are both going to go and popping off. Alright, there we go. This is the final tier list. Is there anything you agree with? I'm only putting Wolfsbane here because somebody played it in a tournament against me, believe it or not. So yeah, this is the final tier list. Is there anything you massively disagree with? Obviously, you wanted to rush through it somewhat because it was taking, still took ages and there's a ton of cards. I'm going to be doing these for other factions now. We've done the neutrals, so let me know what faction do you want to see most. We'll do Syndicate last because it's not a starter deck, but we'll still do it. Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it and you watched this far. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, thanks so much for watching. See you on the next one. And if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed. Deuces.